Sure.
Hey, it's Gabriella with the JDFI show, and here we like to highlight people that go from zero to implementation without hesitation, and they just effing do it. So I came upon Thor's story, I don't know, maybe a year ago, maybe two, and he is currently traveling the world without the use of airplanes. So he's using any other mode of transportation, or maybe not, but not with any planes. And I thought that that was ridiculously cool. And I told him before that I had noticed him on social media. It might have been a year or two ago. And then I kind of looked again, and he's still traveling. So, I mean, this has been going on for years. So I was intrigued, and I wanted to share his story with all of you. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
Thanks. And he's joining me from Taipei. So we're very appreciative. It's very late for him, but such is the life of a traveler. So tell me where you got this crazy idea to do what you're doing.
Sure. So the golden sentence within what I'm doing is that I'm traveling to every single country there is in the world. I'm doing it in one single unbroken journey, and I'm doing it all completely without flying. So I'm here in Taiwan now, country number 179. I've been traveling since 2013, and I haven't been home in between. So that's more than 5.5 years now. The idea came after my father sent me an email with an article, and I read about a well-traveled man, and it dawned on me that no one in history has gone to all the countries of the world completely without flying. There's been a really solid attempt in the past, but it hasn't been done completely without flying. So that's what I'm going for here.
Okay, so talk to me about, I guess I can understand some of the shorter distances, especially over water, but for some of the longer ones, what kind of transport are you using?
Yeah, well, so the majority of this project has been conducted with buses and with trains, and the numbers are getting pretty high. It's a lot of buses and a lot of trains for sure. I've been on board 18 container ships, 19 container ships now, I believe. And that's a great deal of container ships, but looking at the time span of 5.5 years and all the modes of transportation, it's a quite tiny portion of the transportation within the project. But it's basically public transportation, 99% of all of this.
Oh my goodness. And when did you exactly start?
I started on the 10th of October, 2013 at 10:10 a.m. in the morning.
Oh my God. Where was that point? Where was that first point?
I'm from Denmark, a small country in the north of Europe. And I started in south of Denmark, just where we border Germany. So the kickoff point was the 10th of the 10th at 10:10 a.m. So it'd be 4 10s, 10, 10, 10, 10. And then I hopped on a bus, and that happened to be bus number 1. And that took me to a train station. And the train took me across the border to Germany, and off we went.
All right, silly question, but was this strategically planned, or did you just kind of have a loose skeleton itinerary and just say, okay, I'll do what I want? Or are you meticulous, and do you have this like down to the mile, down to the bit of transport? How did you even embark on this?
It's something in between. There was a 10-month planning period where I'd say you could shorten that down to less than 3 months probably in reality. However, it started with just talking about it, and was this something I was even going to embark on, and so on. And then it evolved into a project, and then we set a date, and we got ready for that. I have some friends on board from the beginning of the project trying to help me get it started, and so on. So I worked out all the logistics in terms of what's country number 1, 2, 3, all the way up to this project has 203 countries, being every country in the world, but different projects have different numbers depending on what you define as a country. And I guess I've stuck to at least 95% of the plan as it was planned out in 2013. However, because of conflict zones, or because ferries have disappeared and were not there when I arrived, and this kind of stuff, sometimes I had to change small details within the plan.
What has been the most interesting or surprising place that you have seen, and why? Tough question after seeing every country, huh?
Yeah. So there are countries that kind of resemble each other. You go like Denmark. We like to say we're special, but in the end, we're maybe a little bit like Sweden and a little bit like the Netherlands. And you go to Nicaragua, they might be a little bit like Honduras or Guatemala. And Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, they share some similarities and so on and so forth. So I really, really like when I reach a country and I go like, there's nothing like this country. And I'd say Cuba is a country like that. I just can't compare Cuba to anything. It's in the Caribbean, and the distance is short, and the nature and the geography and all of this is quite similar. But Cuba is definitely Cuba, in the same way that Ethiopia is just Ethiopia. And I went up to Greenland. Greenland is a country within this project as well, and you just can't compare Greenland to anything. So I think those are quite special countries. But kind of being surprised, I'd say basically every war-torn country or conflict country I've gone to has surprised me in that you get a chance to look at what the cameras are not pointing at. And the reality of many of these countries, while security might be poor, and while I do understand that there's a lot of hardship, people, they still find a way to live lives. They are still playing football. They're still taking selfies and uploading it to Instagram. And people fall in love and get married. And there's quite a realization in going to countries and seeing that in Syria, or seeing that in Yemen, or seeing that in South Sudan, that life just continues, even in these very hard conditions.
That's amazing. That's exactly what I wanted to know, because we're so, we're fed images, right? And of course things go on, but I think as being a frequent traveler myself, you get somewhere and you realize that there's so much behind the curtain, right? That you see, and I think life has to go on for people, there's no other choice.
Definitely. Yeah. Now a great example which was really eye-opening was that I was in Lebanon for quite a while trying to get the visa for Syria. And they hold maybe up around 2 million refugees from Syria. And the way that these refugees have been portrayed in television for most of us have been people walking across a field, just carrying a couple of bags and maybe their children and stuff like this. But in reality, some 400,000 cars were packed and drove across the border. Like people, they packed up their lives and said, we can't stay here anymore, and brought whatever they had. And some of these people already had apartments in Lebanon that they used as weekend apartments and stuff like this. But 400,000 cars went over the border and added to the traffic and to the pollution also, of course, but also buying gas and so on. We don't see those stories for whatever reason.
No, we don't. I suppose not. I mean, so what was the most challenging or difficult place that you've encountered? I guess maybe as far as logistics or even communication. I mean, what would you say has been? Yeah, it doesn't have to be one. I'm just curious. What have you found challenging? It all sounds great, but I'm sure there must have been some aha moments of, was this a good idea kind of thing?
Well, if you are from the United States of America, then Equatorial Guinea is a country where you can just fly into. You're not required to have a visa. And I think that's the only country in the world that has that privilege. Every other country in the world would struggle to some degree with getting into Equatorial Guinea. So that was, and I had never heard about Equatorial Guinea. I knew it was an African country in Central Africa, and I added it to my list, and I looked like it's tiny, and I thought, okay, I'll go from Cameroon into Equatorial Guinea, and I'll continue to Gabon. But it's just not that simple. I hadn't really done my research in terms of that prior to embarking on all of this. So that was a hurdle. Saudi Arabia, I went to Saudi Arabia while Saudi Arabia was still a difficult country to go to. It's not to say that anyone can just go now, but it was a lot more difficult just a few months ago. What else do we have? There are some island nations, try to get to the Seychelles without flying, or
and that Eritrea. Could be a little treacherous on the water, huh? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, so in the waters that you pass there are out in front of Somalia, and they're notorious for piracy and so on, although the piracy is much less than what it used to be. And the piracy story is also super interesting when you dig into that and saying like what really went on and what were we told in the media and what really went on in the region. But anyway, getting to Seychelles, incredibly difficult without flying. Getting to a number of island nations, difficult without flying. There are a number of visas that you can only apply for if you are applying within your resident country. And I found ways to do that anyway, so those were difficult. And then Eritrea. Eritrea is this wonderful, wonderful country in so many ways, but very, very difficult to reach and almost impossible without flying.
It's just incredible. It's blowing my mind that you were able to see these places from such a different lens. I mean, and I'm going to ask a question because we have a lot of entrepreneurs that watch this show. How are you financing this journey? I mean, what are you doing for money? Are you taking odd jobs along the way? I just have to ask, how does one do this?
Yeah, so the best laid plans of mice and men's often go argyle. I had a financial sponsor from the beginning of this project, Ross Offshore, Norwegian, Danish offshore company within well management. They were sponsoring the $20 per day, which is the average budget for this project. So $20 per day. That covers transportation, accommodation, meals, and visas. So it's a bit painful sometimes. But it is an average. I can splurge. I can go to a nice hotel. I can eat a steak. I just need to make up for it somewhere else. And they were sponsoring that, and they continued doing that for 2.5 years. Then the oil business was very poor, and they were in a state of the company where they had to make some decisions. And one of the decisions was to cut costs where they could. And one of those places was sponsoring the guy with the hat and the beard. Yeah? So then I started tapping into my own funds. I'd been working, I'm 40 years old. I've been working my entire life. So I had money on my bank account, and I spent until there was nothing left. I had an old sailboat and I had to sell that. So that's gone now. And I spent that money too. I borrowed money, spent all of that. Then I borrowed more money, spent all of that. Then I did a crowdfunding campaign. I have a bit of followers on social media, and they were generous. So that got us to where we are today. And today there's a Patreon account. I write a few articles and whatnot. Overall, I see this as an investment in my life, something that I will be able to benefit from in the long run, in the same sense that some people go out and they get a university degree and they spend a lot of money getting that degree, but then once they have the degree, they can go out and get the job they want and make the money back. And I might lose within this project. I'll definitely lose within this project. However, going home, I hope to write a book. I hope to do public speaking events and go to companies and schools and universities and so on.
Yeah, I would imagine that just the payback and your emotions and everything that you've learned on this journey is far well worth it, and that probably more worth it than all of us that spend $1,000 on university and graduate education, and we're like, what have we seen, right? So many of us,
yeah.
and you've actually done it all. I was going to say, what happens when you get back? I mean, how are you going to adjust to normal life? Like, how are you going to do this? And are you going to treat yourself to a plane ticket when you're finally done? Or are you actually going to go back to Denmark the way that you came? I'm hoping you're going to.
Yeah, there were a few questions in that. So I'm engaged to a wonderful woman. My fiance is back home in Denmark. And when I go back home, then I will definitely sleep for 1 month. And when I wake up, I'll shave because she doesn't like my beard at all. And then if we're not married, we'll get married, we'll start a family. And meanwhile, I'll try writing a book. And then I'll go into this new world of public speaking, motivational speaking. So I don't see it as I'm coming home and continuing my old life. I see it as I'm rounding up this adventure, which this has already been. And then I'll continue running social media, and I'll start a new life with family and children and flying out to Tokyo and speaking for a couple of hours, flying to San Diego, speaking for a couple of hours, flying back home again. Your other question
with
related to reaching
possible stories to tell. I can't imagine anyone telling better stories.
Well, yeah, imagine Alzheimer's for someone like me, just everything gone like that. It would be a nightmare. Yeah, so yeah, don't
write it all down.
That,
I think the book is an excellent idea. I think a lot of people would benefit from reading that and just the stories that you've acquired along the way. And I would say, okay, what do you think you need to get along everywhere? What is universal? Is it a wave, a smile? Is it a particular word? I mean, what has gotten you, through some of the difficult situations? I would say a smile is probably universal. Would you agree?
Yes, smiling is good. However, smiles can be misinterpreted in the wrong situations. And, it's not always appropriate to smile, but I do tend to smile a lot. And I think, if you can walk into an immigration office or into a checkpoint and have people laugh within the first 10, 15 seconds, then the entire scenario is going to be a lot easier than anything else. I think persistence, but being polite and doing it the right way. Like I haven't bribed anyone at any point within this project. I don't think I've been, yeah. Yeah, but yeah, I've been to a lot of countries where that would have been normal. Like I've been blocked in certain roads or certain places within this project where the obvious outcome of it would have been that I gave them $10 or $50 or who knows what. But I just stood fast and said, that's not what I do. I have my papers in order. I'm ready to wait it out. And that's perhaps also why this has gone on for now 5.5 years, because there are some situations I could have solved in 10 minutes and instead I did it in 3 months,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
A lot of that.
Yeah. So
right,
generally, sorry?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So, you had a question before where you asked if I was going to fly home or not, and I'm not planning. I'm not planning on flying home. For the first few years within this project, I didn't know was I going to fly home or not. I said it was going to depend on my mood. But a couple of years ago, I worked out if I want to be able to say I went to every country in the world without flying, then I would have to go to Denmark, and I didn't do that. I went from Denmark. So in order to have the sentence,
wow, tricky, very tricky.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So
but I guess
that.
What's one more leg of the journey, right? At this point, it probably doesn't matter
exactly.
too much. How many more countries do you have? I mean, when do you project to be finished with this?
I've got 24 more countries, and looking back at what has been accomplished so far, I have an average time per country, which is 11.4 days. And then looking ahead, I imagine I'll have some complications, I'll have some delays, I'll also have some easy countries, and I'll probably also have some luck. So why wouldn't that also be the same average, 11.4 days per country? And that puts me in the last country in January 2020.
Wow. And then onwards.
But let's see. Yeah, so what I was about to say before was to pull off something like this, you have to wonder who can do this, who could go to every country in the world completely without flying and not come home until it has been done. And on top of that, there's a little rule which says I have to spend more than 24 hours in a country before I can count it, which means that hard to get to countries, you can't just step across the border. You need to get the visa in order to go and spend 24 hours and so on. So I looked into that together with a great journalist from Uganda, Bob. And Bob and I were sitting and talking, saying, what do you need as a person? What kind of qualifications do you need to embody to do this? And we worked out that you'd certainly need to have problem-solving skills. If there's just one problem along the way that you can't solve, then you might as well go home. You need to have social skills as well. If you can't get people to like you, then nobody will help you, and you need help constantly. Nobody's pulling this off on their own. Like, it's a network of all the people I meet, and getting a cup of tea, a pat on the back, a translation, someone pointing me in the right direction, the telephone number for somebody's brother, and it's just amazing the network that comes out of this. But you need the social skills to pull that off, and then you need to carry through when it doesn't make sense anymore. When you want to go home, when you're in pain and you're tired and you're sick and you're hungry, and you felt like that for months, and the world doesn't care, and you can't remember why you're doing it anymore, and the only real solution to all of that misery is to go to the airport and fly back home. Then you still need to brush your teeth and get dressed and go out and shake hands and drink some tea and make the connections and keep getting at it and going at it. Because if you don't continue, then the project stops. If you can't find the solutions, the project stops. And if you can't make the connection, the project stops. So you need to have that.
No, it looks like it takes an incredible amount of perseverance. I actually can't even imagine. I know I'm a determined person, but I also like my comfort. So if I had a hat, I'd take it off to you, because I think what you've done is incredible. So how can people follow you? Where can they find you on your blog?
Yeah, sure. So the blog is on onceuponasaga.dk, but also on .com. It's a name that we derived from Danish history and Nordic history. Denmark is a fairy tale kind of country, and where I come from, we start fairy tales with once upon a time. So we took the beginning of that and said once upon a, and then the saga part, S-A-G-A, saga, that's an old Viking word. So when the Vikings, they would venture out in their wooden ships and discover new land and meet people and plant flowers and make friends and kill a few people too. Then they would come back home and they would write down the stories, and those stories would be called a saga. So Once Upon a Saga.com or DK. And if you go to the webpage, the links are there for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. There's a weekly blog once every Friday. I release a blog if I can, and that's the social media.
Last question. What are you carrying with you, and how are you carrying it all? What's in the bag? What's in the bag, and what kind of bag are you using? Because I know people want to know.
Yeah, sure. I'm carrying 30 kilos. I'm not sure what that is in pounds, but you would work that out. And that's in 2 bags. The smaller one is 8 kilos, and the larger one is 22 kilos. They are both North Face bags, and the larger one is a North Face base camp duffel bag, a black one at that. And it's just one big room, and I open up, and then I have everything organized inside. I think I can pack it and unpack it with my eyes closed at this point. And inside I have mosquito nets, I've got a hammock, I have running shoes, I have plenty of clothes, I have some electronics, laptop, and this kind of stuff. I have all the wires for charging all the stuff that I have. I have a few books. I have a sleeping bag as well. Yeah, that's the basics of it.
Incredible, living off the basics and seeing the best of the world. So a lot of us could never do what you're doing. So, again, hats off to you, and thank you so much for sharing your story. Really appreciate it.
No, I really appreciate speaking to you. Thank you so much.
All right.